Okay, my name is Nathan Jones. I'm a staff attorney with DNA Legal Services. The particular office I work in is in Flagstaff, Arizona. We have offices in other places throughout the, but before I get into more detail, I'll just say that what basically I am is I'm a staff attorney with a legal aid agency. What that means is free civil legal representation to people who live at or around the poverty line. At the simplest level, that's what it is. What makes us a little different is that we do have a focus on specifically Indian reservations, and in large part the Navajo Indian Reservation, which is the largest in the country. We're depending on how you measure it, but we're the largest Native American legal services agency that there is. And as such, the work can be a little different than your run-of-the-mill legal aid office, but for the sake of simplicity and brevity, I'll say that I'm a legal aid staff attorney.
Sweet. So I apologize for those of you who have already heard my spiel. I graduated from U of O in 2008. And I came out here in the first place as I wanted to do environmental law. I originally thought I wanted to work for a nonprofit or do government work, and I ended up working at Stoll Reeves doing renewable energy law, and I love my job. So I guess that's the very brief introduction. We primarily represent renewable energy developers in our practice group. We also do some utility work and just energy work in general.
My name is Jamila Taylor, and I am the Central Area Network Coordinator and the Director of the Street Outreach Program for the Seattle Youth Violence Prevention Initiative at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. In short, I just do a lot of things. I am a 2007 graduate of this university, and I enjoyed my time very much here. And I'll get into how I got my position in a little bit, but I just wanted to say that real quick.
My name's Christopher Amblad. I'm a staff attorney with the Northwest Justice Project, which is the largest legal aid provider in the state of Washington. Specifically, I work for a unit that's funded by the city of Seattle, which is called the Seattle Domestic Violence Project. And so what I do primarily is my practice, and I've been doing, not necessarily in this unit, but for a number of years, is representing survivors of domestic violence in civil matters, particularly protection order matters, but also in things like divorce cases, parenting plan cases, custody matters, and things that are really geared towards ensuring the safety of my clients and her children.
My name is Tom Matsuda. I'm the Executive Director of Legal Aid Services of Oregon, which is one of the 5 legal aid programs in this state. It's the largest of the 5. We have 12 offices, about 100 total staff, about half of whom are staff attorneys. And the easiest way to think about us is we are the law firm for the poor in civil matters in this state. And I'm sort of, functionally, I'm kind of like the managing partner and fundraiser.
My name is Dan Cruz. I spoke on the environmental panel before this, so I'll try not to be redundant. I work for a nonprofit organization here in town called Cascadia Wildlands Project, doing mostly federal environmental litigation. I sue the government a lot to protect old growth forests, endangered species, wildlife, that sort of thing. I also, and for the past 3 years, I graduated from the University of Oregon in 2006. For the past 3 years, I've had my own private criminal defense practice, which has helped me subsidize my habit of suing the government. It doesn't always pay as well. And that's worked out well for me. I've been asked, I think, to give a little bit different perspective on this panel as somebody who does public interest work, public interest environmental work part-time, and then kind of subsidizes that or augments my income with a criminal practice.
Great. Well, thanks for the introduction. I think what I'd like to start off with is the idea of this panel is really more in-depth on how to get into the different areas of work and how those areas might be changing. And I think that something also that Dan brought up is the issue which is on the top of a lot of people's minds, and I think was probably asked in all the panels before, is how do you do this type of work with the loan burden that you come out with from law school? And I think, Dan has a unique perspective, but I'm sure that many of you do as well. So those are just kind of a basic guiding questions, but I think really focus on how to get into these, this is a diverse group, and that was the idea of the panel. How to get into just the different things that you've gotten into, maybe how you personally did it, and just ways that you think in the future might be the way to go. And whoever would like to start may, but we'll just go from this end.
Okay, sounds like we got a two-parter there. How do you get into it, and then how do you stay in it? What it sounds like it pretty much amounts to, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, how I got into it was during law school, all of my summers, and previous to law school as well, during undergrad. During undergrad, in fact, is where I really discovered that I wanted to do public interest legal work. I worked for a time as an investigator at a state government agency in Massachusetts called the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. Sort of like the EEOC, except there they have the ability to make administrative orders. The EEOC doesn't do that except with government employment. But so what it involved was investigating these cases of alleged discrimination for the purpose of determining whether there was probable cause. The lawyers I met working there were so happy with what they were doing. The environment was so collegially, you felt like you were doing real good. Then I knew I wanted to head in that path moving forward. So that was my first experience with it. Wound up going to law school, returned to the commission for a time during one of the summers, during the first summer. Second summer was Department of Justice, but there I sort of found myself on the wrong side of things. I was in or what I felt to be the wrong side of things. I don't mean to impugn anybody, but I wound up on the civil side, doing work on immigration appeals, but the side where you're trying to kick the person out. And I didn't really, that wasn't where my heart was. And so following that, I wound up looking at legal aid, and specifically, there's sort of a connection between my agency, between DNA out in Arizona and Massachusetts, which is by sheer coincidence, our director of administration just happened to go to school in Boston as well. So as a result, they tend to come out there and recruit. They came out and recruited. I took the job. And then it became a matter of how do you actually get by doing it. I've actually kind of earned a reputation around my office as the student loan master. The IBR, of course, is recent, income-based repayment, the new federal thing that everybody's talking about. That, of course, is recent, as is the Grad Plus loans that a lot of you have probably taken out. They were before my time. I graduated in '06. So in the meantime, we had this approximately three-year gap until now, which is how was I getting by? How was I making the loan payments? The answer is, how many people here have heard of something called LSC? Anyone know what it is? Okay, LSC is the Legal Services Corporation. It's where we get pretty much all of our funding. I was fortunate enough that at the time I started, I was on the, LSC has a pilot LRAP. There's a loan repayment assistance project that LSC has on its own. It lasts for 3 years. I was on that. That basically covered my loans for that time. That ended just in time for IBR. And so then I was able to, now I'm on that, and things, IBR is, your payment is 15% of your income over 150% of the poverty line. Make less than 150%, which, thank goodness, it's not that bad. But if you do, your payment was zero. Otherwise, it's 15% of that portion of your income that's over 150%. So that is, by definition, an affordable payment. It's meant to be. And it's even better for you guys because you have the option of these Grad Plus loans, which are government-backed, which means they can all be included in that as well. When I graduated, Grad Plus didn't exist. A lot of people were stuck taking out, a bunch of private loans with shysters called Access Group. I have no love for them. But the point is, now you guys are in a fortunate position that, you know, you can't, I think that when it comes to government or nonprofit work, with the new IBR, with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, there's no reason that anybody who really wants to can't make it work. That's my perspective on it. That's a fortunate position to be in. I've managed to make it work since before that time, so it's become significantly easier since then. So I encourage people not to worry too much about the low salaries and whatnot, because you do gain a lot of experience very quickly. There are some great opportunities here, and there have been some developments that benefit all of you current students that just make it even easier. So that's my take on it.
So my perspective is obviously a little bit different since I'm at a large law firm. My interest in renewable energy I can trace as far back as 5th grade when I did a report on solar energy and thought it was so amazing that you could actually get energy from a resource that was renewable, and so that sort of spurred my interest, but I never thought I'd make a career out of it necessarily, and I certainly, even when I started law school, I didn't know that there were jobs doing renewable energy law. I didn't even know that was a field. But during my first year, I got the opportunity to get a job at Sol Reeves, and part of the things that attracted me to that firm is the fact that they had a large renewable energy practice. So I worked there for the summer and ended up just being blown away by the people that I worked with, just some really amazing people that are really passionate about what they do and really happy that they are no longer doing traditional energy and, you know, doing a lot more wind and solar and biomass and ocean and things like that. So we still do some traditional energy, but the focus of our practice has changed a lot. And so the people that I work with are really passionate about what they do and trying to combat climate change as best as possible. So yeah, I just had a wonderful experience. I actually did a lot of research my first summer on wave energy issues, and so that sort of helped me start to develop a niche in that area. Ended up working there my second summer, and then after law school. Of course, I understand in this climate, those types of jobs are getting harder and harder to get. It's getting a lot more competitive, and I think that law firms are definitely going to start shrinking their summer programs, hiring less people, and being a lot more selective about who they hire, at least in the short term until things bounce back. But even over the long term, I think a lot of the law firms, at least in Portland, have been cutting a lot of their overhead and trying to find ways to run more efficiently. So that might mean that in the long term there's less hires, or the money, it's not going to be as lucrative, or whatever it is. So the best thing you can do, I actually, again, apologize to those of you that were here for the last panel, but I did speak with my recruiting manager yesterday to try to get some pointers to pass along to you guys, and she said, of course, right now, grades are obviously a really easy way to weed people out, and they were always important, but now even more so as it becomes increasingly competitive. Also, job experience is something that they value really highly, whether it's if you had a career before law school doing something that will help you stand out, or if you went either straight through, or maybe you took only a year or two off, you weren't like the CEO of some company. Other things that they look for are leadership positions in different organizations, whether it's a student group or a journal or some community group, whatever it is. Something that shows that you're passionate about what you do and that you took on a leadership responsibility and did so competently. Those things will help you stand out. Another thing that's really important is just networking, developing mentoring relationships, doing mock interviews. Take advantage of all those opportunities to do that, and just make contacts with people wherever it is that you want to stay. If you know that you want to end up in Oregon, there's obviously tremendous opportunities to do mentoring programs here where you can get connected with attorneys throughout the state, and I just encourage you to take advantage of that as much as possible. If you want to be in Portland, get up to Portland and come to different events to meet people there. And certainly University of Oregon is just, it's a great place to go to law schools. People really look after each other here even after you graduate, and the alums are very supportive, and so you have a lot of resources at your disposal you should take advantage of, as well as wonderful professors who will always be around to answer questions and offer advice throughout the years. So take advantage of those opportunities as well. I think that's probably a good start. The other thing I will say is, obviously, working in a big firm, there's less of a concern about how am I going to pay my loans back, but I hope that for those of you who are fortunate enough to not have the concern about how you're going to pay your bills, that you will at least donate to the organizations that are doing this great public interest work, whether it's legal aid or these types of organizations. There's lots of amazing people doing amazing nonprofit work, so hopefully you will support that and LRAP and things like that in your future.
So for me, when I came to law school, I always knew that at some point in my career, probably 10 years after practicing, that I would go and become an executive director of a nonprofit or work in a nonprofit somehow. And so in my process in law school, I wanted to have a broad-based background in all types of law, from nonprofit law, criminal law, civil law, business law, everything. And then I graduated. I had a job ready for me to work in family law in Seattle. And then within 6 weeks, I failed the bar, and then I got fired. So that accelerated my process into getting into the nonprofit world out of necessity. Those character building moments, just love them. So I took the time, I passed the bar, but I had, fortunately, because of the connections I had made here in the law school community, my classmates helped me out. They got me the temp jobs, the doc review jobs, the stuff that pays the bills. And it's not just like flipping burgers for $10 or $11. I mean, when I was doing doc review, I was making $34, $40 an hour. So that definitely helps pay the bills. I definitely networked and got to know people. And the way I network is I like to volunteer. And I've been a champion of public service since I was in my teens. And so I was always involved in community service or curriculum things here, extracurricular activities such as the Black Law Students Association or other programs at the law school. And that gave me the courage when I really needed to be out into the community, when I had no job, no resources, to say, look, I'm looking for a job, but I have all these skills and I have all these connections, and even though I don't have anything to offer you right now other than a great smile and a willingness to do a lot of work, I think it helped me get the doors open for those informational interviews, which you think are a waste of time. First, you get a free meal. Don't sleep on that, because you're going to eat every meal that you get here. You get a free meal, and when you have those informational interviews, those folks, they love to talk about themselves, so you get to hear about their journey. And if you have to, you commiserate about, well, I failed the bar too. Well, great. What did that feel like? It's an amazing experience to talk to someone who's already been through it, and you see that they're successful. As someone who's at the top of their game, that's recognized by the State Bar Association, who failed the bar just like you. So they give you that silver lining at the end of the tunnel, or whatever the metaphor is. And in that informational whatever. Mr. Leininger knows exactly how I was in class. I sat in every single seat in the back row in this building, hiding behind that computer, and I was doing my networking on Facebook. But anyways, I went into those informational interviews with a goal, which was to have other contacts. So you're not just meeting that one person. Your intent is to have 5 other names that you can go contact and talk about. Well, I'm interested in family law, so can I take you to lunch? And they say, yeah, sure. They want to talk about themselves. You will be prepared to pay for lunch, but you never pay for lunch. But that was my process in terms of looking for the next opportunity. And as I was volunteering, I was doing a lot of work with the Urban League, and the CEO recognized that, Jamila Taylor, attorney, probably can write, so we need help writing this proposal for this initiative that we have been working on. And so he called me up on Thanksgiving, and he said, well, can you come help us? And I said, sure. When do you need me to start? Can you start today? It's Thanksgiving. I'll be there on Monday. So I came in on Monday, and the rest is history. And, the job is amazing. I basically got to write my position and create a whole department in this organization that they had never done before. They had never had a street outreach program. They had not collaborated with a lot of organizations in this way. And I got to do what I did best, which was networking with people, talking to people to kind of get things moving along and help them with the policy making as they build this initiative. I'm sure you've heard a little bit about it up there in Seattle. it's been an amazing journey. Like the first week of working there, there was a protest at my job, and of course the CEO was off that day, so I got to handle it. And there's nothing like working in a very controversial and high stakes initiative that everyone and their mothers have an opinion about, and everyone wants to tell you how you can do your job better. I'm like, well, it didn't exist before, but I'm doing the best that I can. And so working in that initiative, I had to learn a whole lot of things that they don't teach you about in law school. Like, I really don't like talking to the press. And apparently the press, they don't work by the same ethical guidelines that attorneys do. And and I was surprised by that. And folks call us less than ethical. I have to say that I know this is going to be on TV one day, and it's going to come back to haunt me. But
Junior Supreme Court.
on YouTube. Yeah. I love the press. The press is great. But somehow
they're not to be trusted.
They're not to be trusted. They're not to be trusted. So you learn a lot of different things that you might not think that you have to deal with as an attorney when you work in a nonprofit world. Being able to write and being able to communicate is such a highly needed skill that if you leave this building and you say you want to work somewhere else other than in the legal profession, there will be doors opening for you. They hear that you're a lawyer and they somehow think that you know everything about everything. I don't, but I pretend like that on TV. So that's just us, or me, in a nutshell, in terms of what I do up in Seattle, even though I really didn't get into all what I specifically do, but the path, that character building moment really teaches you when you are actually in the moment of doing your work, when you're commiserating with your classmates about, I'm here at the job at 11 o'clock and I'm not getting big firm money. What the F? But your passion drives you. Your willingness to do the work the best that you can, and you have that end goal of that other driving force that's not money, that's not just putting food on the table. It is helping someone in the long run.
Good job. I don't know if I'm the best model when I think about this question of how I got in, because to give you some perspective, when I was about to enter law school, I had graduated with an English degree, primarily focused on feminist philosophical literature and media analysis. And I was working in a record store. All of them were highly employable skills that I had as I was looking towards my future. I ended up in law school based on probably two reasons. One, I knew I could read and write, so I figured why not. But number two, at the time, there were three things I was really into. I was really into art, I was really into music, and I was really into social justice. And it was the art and the music that really was that passion. And the artists that I was into were performance artists. When you have someone like Karen Finley doing performance art and screaming, "I'm more than a biological opportunity." The artists I liked were what you call the Riot Girl movement that stemmed out of Olympia. Sleater Kinney was my favorite band. I miss them terribly. Those bands, those artists had a social justice message. And even in undergraduate, it was the social justice that I wanted to do when I got to law school. So I didn't know exactly how that was going to play out, but I knew that I was not going for the big law firm position. I was going to go for some type of position that would best utilize my skills to help a lot of people. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. So my model of how I got to this position is probably not the best. It was very haphazard, actually. I mean, my first year I didn't like law school. And it was only until I had my criminal law course that I thought, well, I at least like this. So the first year I did a prosecutor position, worked with a lot of the victim advocates in the prosecutor's office, and I really found that working with crime victims or people that have been the victims of criminal offenses really did appeal to me. I thought I was going down the prosecutor route, but there are only so many positions there, and eventually I got steered towards, my family law professor was very much in the civil legal aid field, and she was she ran a basically a children's justice clinic that was looking out for the best interests of the children and working and protecting the children through various family law proceedings. And she used to work in legal aid, and when I graduated and had no job prospects and no direction, she was fundamental in plugging me into the people that I needed to talk to. I also did, for a year before I got my position, a lot of volunteer work with local bar associations who had clinics. So they were good not only for teaching me the basics that law school had kind of neglected to teach me, but also connecting me with more people and working with, getting direct client contact, which I hadn't really had through law school. And that working directly with people is where I started to understand that that's where my skill lie, or laid. English major, that's great. I got into legal aid. A lot of it was fortune because I met the right people and they got me in the door. But the reason why they chose to hire me is because I could demonstrate a passion for working for the disenfranchised. I could show a skill in working well with people on a direct level because this job is about client contact. And I think I demonstrated that I could play more roles than just a lawyer. And that's the thing about being a civil legal aid attorney that I love, is that yes, primarily I am a lawyer and I'm in court, but there is a part of my role that is an educator because I'm not representing every client that comes to me. And so a lot of my work is advising people on a very short-term basis about what their rights are and how they can better advance their case, or in my situation, how you can better protect yourself. And that's an education component. So I am a teacher in many ways. I am a social worker in many ways because every one of my clients has gone through a crisis, is just emerging through a crisis, or is still in an ongoing crisis. And it's not just about escaping their abuser, it's about the fact that he was the one that earned the money and now I have no money, so where do I get the money? He's still in the home, it's not safe for me to be in the home, I'm homeless, how do I get into a house? So it allows you to explore many facets of your personality, many interests that are not so pigeonholed into just lawyering. The other thing is it provides you an opportunity to explore various areas of law. If somebody had told me 10 years ago that I had been a family law attorney, I'd have told them they were crazy. I really didn't like family law. And there was a period during legal aid where I absolutely hated it. Now I love it, but it's because I've discovered that those are where my skills lie, and I won in court in family law, and I always lost in housing law. Winning cannot be overstated. So, as far as how you stay in it, I think Nathan's point is right on. I was fortunate to go, I shouldn't admit this being in hostile territory, but I went to University of Washington.
Can't be helped.
Can't be helped, I know. But you should be thanking us this week because the Pac-10's wide open right now. But anyway, at the time I was going, it was very affordable, and I was an in-state resident. And so even though I am still paying on my loans, there were some programs, some of the programs that Nathan had talked about, I had gotten connected with. And so I was able to pay down some of them. My loan, I'm going to be paying for another 20 years, but it's an affordable loan and I can forbear on it if I need to. The opportunities that are there for you with the ones that Nathan had talked about are, I wish I had them. And I have, I'm late to the game, and my salary is now crossed where there's no way I can be eligible for those programs. But yeah, those opportunities are there for you. So I think what's more important to express, we've talked about, networking is very important, absolutely. I've sat on personnel committees and hiring committees, and I can tell you, where you go to law school doesn't really matter to us. Your grades, as long as you can demonstrate you're competent, that really wasn't at the forefront of us either. Law review, it's great, but it's not fundamental for our position. You know, what really matters when it really comes down to it is a demonstrated commitment to working for the communities that you want that we're serving. If you come in and have no experience working with low-income people or not working with the disenfranchised, we're going to question whether you have a long-term goal to be in this field. And so as you're starting law school, looking at those volunteer opportunities is really important. And the volunteering serves another purpose. It helps you network, helps you connect with people and get you in that door. And it really helps you nuance and understand what you want to do. The other thing I would emphasize, though, is I didn't tap into the things that really drove me into law school, I think, in the beginning, looking in hindsight, you know, my passion for art and music, like some of my colleagues have. And it's very important when you're going through law school and sometimes you feel like you're getting beaten down and they want to like take away everything that is important to you and reprogram you. Don't lose that, because it's that creativity, it's that passion, it's that thinking outside the box that leads you to develop projects. And right now, the things that we're hiring people for are when law students can come to us as interns and say, I have an idea. This is where I see a need. This is a pilot project idea that I'm thinking about. Here's where we could possibly get funding. You know, my law school has at my law school it was called Public Interest Law Association. Here it's PIPS, I guess. And you know, they could get grants from this association to work on in the summer to develop that pilot project. Showing that innovation keeps your name at the forefront, and it shows that you have some ingenuity that we would like to have as the years go by. So that is my suggestion as far as other things to consider when staying with it.
I'm easily the oldest person at this table, so some of what I have to say may not be quite as relevant because the circumstances for all of you are quite different from when I went to law school. But I think what may be of value is that if you just follow sort of the arc of my path to how I got to this point, you can see, perhaps, I hope, that there are certain things that are in common with what you're hearing from the other folks at the table. I'm just a little bit further down the road. Because these folks at the table that are with me are just as much leaders in their fields, you know, and they haven't arrived yet at, you know, the full potential that they have, but they're well on their way. Oh, thanks. So I was raised in Hawaii. Is there anybody here from Hawaii? Okay. Hey, Larry. Yeah, and we've already met. So I was raised there, and I decided to go to law school because of something that was happening when I was in college that related to Native Hawaiian land rights, and I won't go into that. That's another story. But it became very evident to me as I became involved in it that the law was perhaps the most effective way to achieve change in an important way at a societal level. So I went into it. I graduated from Hastings College in San Francisco in 1980. And to just put it in context for you, if I remember right, I think I finished with about $10,000 in debt, you know, in student loans. But the other side of that coin is that my first job was at the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. I got that on a fellowship, and the stipend that I got from the fellowship was $12,500 for the year. So, you know, things change over time, but I don't think the magnitude of the debt and the burden that it put on me is the same as what all of you have to face. I think the burden is significantly greater. But I also completely agree with what Nathan said. The folks that we work with and that we hire at Legal Aid are coming to the same conclusion that he's come to, which is you can make this work. And I think there are even better opportunities now, certainly than there were 10 years ago. For example, at Legal Aid Services of Oregon, because we recognize the problem, in addition to all of these external LRAP opportunities, we also have an internal pay supplement of $400 a month specifically for loan repayment. And it's because we want to attract and retain good young staff attorneys. So anyway, back to my story. I knew going in that I wanted to do something along the lines of legal aid, because at that time, the legal aid program in Honolulu was the only one that was doing Native Hawaiian rights. So I was lucky to get the fellowship. I went back to Honolulu. I got a staff attorney job because of this fellowship. And I did that for 2 years. A regular staff attorney position opened up in the housing unit, so I took that. And I ended up staying at the legal aid program for 7 years. One of the great things about working at legal aid is you tend to be able to move up on the ladder of responsibility really fast. So by the time I was 5 years in, I was the deputy director of the program. And I learned a lot of good management skills from that. But then after 7 years, I moved to Oregon. So I've been here about 20 years. At that point in my life, I was married, I had a child, and there were some financial pressures that I think I needed to respond to, but primarily I wanted to do something different. And so I tried private practice. I didn't know anybody. I was a complete stranger to this community. I was looking for a job for 6 months, but I was very fortunate ultimately to be hired by a private firm in Portland called Kell Alterman and Runstein. It's about a 15 to 18 attorney firm. They've never grown very big. They had a general civil practice, both litigation and transactional. And they hired me because at that time there was a lot of Japanese investment happening in Oregon. I'm ethnically Japanese. I speak a little bit of Japanese, and so I could function both as a lawyer and kind of as a cultural liaison with the clients that they were trying to cultivate. And so I moved from litigation in legal aid into transactional work, and I ended up doing a lot of corporate, employment, real estate. It's kind of the whole gamut to serve these businesses that were moving into the state. I ended up staying at that firm for 12 years, and a little bit to my surprise, I was also able to move up relatively quickly. So after, I think it was after 8 years, I became the managing partner of the firm. So that was also a wonderful experience for me because I learned a lot about managing a business, which came in very handy in my current job. But the other thing that job did for me was it gave me tremendous networking opportunities in the bar and in the business community in Portland. But during the same period, my heart really never left legal aid, so I served on the boards of directors of several different legal aid programs while I was in private practice. And that's how I learned about this job. So after being in private practice for 12 years, I had pretty much felt like I figured it out. I could do it, but I wasn't really satisfied. So this executive director job opened up, and I kind of leaped at it. I needed to do something different. And so I took a pay cut, which was fine. I never looked back. I don't regret the change at all. This is a much more rewarding job in every way except money. What I'm doing now is, I started to talk about it when I introduced myself. I'm running probably about somewhere between the 15th and 20th largest firm in the state, law firm. But it happens to be nonprofit, and our clients happen to be all poor. But the challenges of the work as a lawyer and the quality of the work that we're doing as lawyers is really no different than being in private practice. It's just that the rules of the game are different. Instead of the billable hour, we have grants and funders that we have to satisfy, but the clients need our legal help just as much, if not more, as the paying clients in the big firms. So the other part of the question was sort of what do I think the future trends are in this field in legal aid? I'll try to make this brief. I could talk about this all day long. That there has been a trend in the legal aid universe in the past 15 years to try to talk about it, to make it politically acceptable, to talk about legal aid in terms of access to justice. And that's a code word that means to try to get at least a minimal amount of services to as many people as possible. Because all of the surveys that are done all over the country indicate that at best, 1 out of every 5 people who apply for services who have a real live legal problem can get assistance from a legal aid office. 1 out of 5. And so the idea was that you want to try to serve as many of those folks as possible. The price that we pay in this system with that emphasis is that you're only at best giving advice and brief service. Maybe a telephone call, maybe a letter. But we actually think, and surveys in the communities have shown us, that what poor folks really want is a lawyer by their side in the courtroom. They want full representation. And so there's a trade-off. Either you serve a lot of people with a telephone call, or you reduce the number of people that you serve and provide full representation. And so we're constantly trying to balance, you know, that pendulum. And I hope that the trend in legal aid at a national level and in the state of Oregon is more towards full representation, because I think the pendulum has drifted too far towards access and brief service. That's obviously, I'm obviously stating a bias. It's because of the nature of my job. But that's something that if you want to get into this field, I think you need to think about. If your motivation is to just help one person at a time with a telephone call, you know, my program is not really interested in that. I mean, we do that because we have to, but we also have to balance that with being able to take cases all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary, and we have done that. So it's really about balance and trying to do the best that we can with very scarce resources, and I think I better stop, or I'll talk about it all day long.
Well, thanks again for inviting me to come talk about what I do. Move this? Sure. I had always had an interest in environmental conservation. It's just sort of the values that I grew up with, and didn't really get directly involved in until a little bit later in my life. It started to converge with criminal law, which is the other half of my practice, when I found myself being carried off of a logging road by 4 police officers, thrown in the back of a wagon and brought to jail. For the next few years throughout college, I was chained to various pieces of heavy equipment and got my kind of experience in the criminal law system as a defendant, and was intrigued by it, and came to law school out of college with this kind of dual interest in environmental law and criminal law. My environmental law interest deriving from just my values, my passion in environmental conservation, and my interest in criminal law coming both from my personal experience, and it was all for nonviolent protests and civil disobedience, that sort of thing, and also from a desire to help people and to sort of protect civil liberties. I've had this interest in civil rights as well as environmental law. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to take both the environmental law clinic and the criminal law clinic here at the university. Had great experiences in both. Really recommend that you get involved in some clinic in whatever field of law that you're interested in. The criminal law clinic was invaluable to me. I had 3 jury trials my 3rd year of law school. Got to go to court fairly regularly and was given a lot of confidence, confidence that allowed me ultimately to open up my criminal practice on my own, which I don't think I would have been able to do had I not had that experience. And so, like I said in the introduction, right now I work for the Cascadia Wildlands Project. I do 3/4 time work for Cascadia Wildlands. I am the legal director. I am involved in overseeing our litigation docket as a whole. I represent the organization in a number of lawsuits, but I also am the liaison between Cascadia Wildlands and other attorneys that represent us, whether it's the Western Environmental Law Center or other local environmental law firms, or other just privately practicing environmental attorneys. I got started with Cascadia on a hike. It was my 1st year of law school. I didn't have a car. I just moved out here. I wasn't familiar with the area, and I heard that there was this group leading hikes, and I like to hike. I like to see the woods. I kind of moved out here to experience the environment a little more, and so I joined them and just started talking to people and got more and more involved. I went to some of their events. That summer, I got an OLSPIF stipend to work as their first legal intern. They didn't have an attorney on staff. They had a couple of board members that were lawyers here in town, so I worked under their supervision, and just continued to stay involved with them. Stayed out of trouble, luckily, for that period of time, which is made it a lot easier to explain to the Bar Association why I had a criminal record. Longer than most of my clients now. But it was just a great kind of fit. And one of the things that I'd recommend, if you want to get involved in any organization, whether it's a small nonprofit or a bigger firm, is to try to find something that fits for you and that fits for them. I think it goes both ways. I often think about how lucky I am not only to be a law student when they hired their first legal intern, but then to be a lawyer when they hired their first attorney. But I think a lot of it had to do with just the fit, that I had developed a relationship with them, that they were the right group for me and I was the right attorney for them. It worked out really well. I feel fortunate, but a lot of it had to do with just the relationships that I built during law school. I'd like to talk a little bit about my criminal practice and how I got started there, because it sort of helped me and really enabled me to do my public interest environmental work. There are a number of opportunities to take court-appointed cases in criminal law. It's one of the ways criminal law is different than a lot of other fields is that people have a constitutional right to a criminal lawyer when they get arrested, if they can't afford to hire one. And so the state or the feds or whatever jurisdiction you're in, they have the legal obligation, the constitutional obligation to pay lawyers to represent people. And unfortunately, the vast majority of people that come through our criminal system are lower income and can't afford to hire an attorney. There is a local public defender's office in Lane County. They've got a couple of dozen attorneys, but whenever there's a conflict of interest with their office, and there frequently is, whenever there are co-defendants, whenever two people are arrested for the same thing, they can't represent both. They can only represent one person. Or whenever a person that they represented 8 years ago is now a witness in this case, they can't take that. And so there are actually an equal number of lawyers taking those conflict cases. Almost half of all criminal cases, indigent defense cases, are conflicted out of the public defender's office. So in Lane County, there's just a list. You get involved, you apply, there's a little bit of an application process, but you get on the list and you start to get cases. And they pay by the hour. It's not a lot, but it really helps keep things going. It helps to pay the bills. I started doing that almost immediately out of law school. I also did some court-appointed cases in Springfield Municipal Court. They've got a similar system going over there. And I was able to build a practice. And the Springfield Municipal Court cases are laughable even compared to the Lane County court-appointed cases, which are laughable in terms of how much they pay you. They're paying $75 per charge. It's like you can work on a case for 30 hours and make $75. Sometimes you work on a case for an hour and there's 8 charges and it works out. But I've been able to kind of develop my practice and to make it work for me. I've since hired a receptionist. I share an office with another attorney. We're not partners, but we're able to share expenses that way. And I get by on a mixture now of court-appointed cases, and I'm still taking court appointments from the Lane County Circuit Court here, and private cases. And I've invested money that I've made from my court-appointed practice, not only into my environmental practice, but into building my criminal practice so that I can take cases that make me more money. It's kind of a nice way to do it. Some of the recommendations that I have are to find mentors. This is something that I said in the last panel, the environmental law panel. It's just invaluable to have people that you know, that you trust, that can help you when you've got questions, especially if you plan to go out on your own. You take a risk. I mean, I've practiced law now for 3 years. I've had my own criminal practice for 3 years, and I perfectly fit the demographic of lawyers that's most likely to commit malpractice. I'm young. I'm young. I don't have a supervisor right above me. And I'm very cognizant of that fact. And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of my own attention to make sure that I'm doing things right. And to have people, even if they're not a partner in a firm, even if they're not directly above me, that I can go to, that I can ask for advice, that I can ask for help, is really important. I mean, it's really what's allowed me to do this. Really strongly recommend you develop those sorts of relationships if you plan to do anything like I've done, kind of going out on your own, doing your own thing. Again, the environmental clinics, the environmental and criminal clinic were great. I think any clinical experience, as well as trial practice, that sort of thing, is really a valuable thing to do while you're in law school. And in terms of keeping things going, how, there's no shortage of criminals. One of the few people I think that can take comfort in the increasing crime rates around here. I think there's always going to be that sort of work, but there is other work that you can do. If you're interested in public interest work and can only really afford to do that part-time, or if you only have an opportunity. I mean, when I first started working for Cascadia, they could only afford to hire me half-time. And that's kind of why I started my own practice, out of necessity and also out of interest. But they've since bumped me up to 3/4 time, and sometime in the next couple of years I might go full-time. But there are opportunities to do public interest work part-time, either for a nonprofit or on your own, and also kind of have a bread and butter practice, whether it's criminal law, whether it's family law, or some other things. There are definitely those opportunities out there. I can't really speak to anything other than the criminal law because that's what I have my experience in. But it's a doable practice. Kind of on the downside, I'm always split in not only physically, like having to go back and forth between offices, but mentally. I've got to think about two things at once on a fairly regular basis. I also have, for a part-time private practice, fairly full-time expenses. I've got to pay malpractice insurance like everybody does, but that's a full-time thing that I wouldn't have to pay if I were only working for a nonprofit. I've got to pay for an office. It's not the easiest way to go about things, but I've really enjoyed it. It's given me the opportunity to do what I want to do on my own terms, represent the people that I want to work for, and have something that's my own that I can kind of be proud of and really feel good about.
I want to thank all the panelists for going through here. I think we have about 10 minutes for questions here. I want to open up to the general group to kind of ask any type of specific things, but also what I'd like to point out is after this, there's going to be more food back in the commons, kind of a dessert, and I think we have, I don't know exactly what we have, but there's actually quite a bit more food and a good place to kind of, and if these panelists, I know there's some other panelists from some of the other panelists who are still around, if they're able to stick around and chat and do maybe some individual, just talking about what you've heard here, or if you have individual questions, that'd be a great place to ask it as well. So just kind of open it up to the group for about 10 or 15 minutes.
I'm going to try to ask this question. I've been sitting here trying to narrow it down, and I think I think that a lot of my fellow students that are interested in public interest probably feel the same way, and it follows up a little bit with what Danny just mentioned about figuring out where you fit. So really my question is, how do we as law students figure out where we fit? And I want to preface that with, I feel like for us to be law students here, it's actually a luxury to be able to go out and be interested and actually take action in the public interest. And I feel like the people that we care about don't have that luxury to get involved with us, but yet we would be at a great advantage if we all could, similar to what Jefferson Smith was talking about, how we can lasso in more folks, the better it is. But at the same time, the more people you have getting on the boat, the more mixed up our directions can go and our intentions can go and whatnot. And so that's why I have this question of how do we figure out where we fit. For me personally, I'm trying to figure out how it is that I can go out and I'm not sure if I would fit better in a policy, larger nonprofit group or on an individual basis, or what community you sort of fit in. And so I want to ask the panel if they've had any experiences where you can hear from Dan, and I think it worked out wonderfully for you, finding you found a fit right in law school.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've ever gone out and figured out, you know what, this isn't what I'm best at doing in my passion, and when you got to that point, what did you do? Or maybe you never had that unfortunate experience and you actually were able to preempt that somehow, if that makes any sense at all.
I can try to, I don't know if I have the best experience to draw an analogy upon, but I started off in legal aid work we have a legal hotline, it's called CLEAR. It stands for Coordinated Legal Education, Advice, and Referral System. It gave me it's basically we're on the hotline every morning for 3 hours. And it could be as much as just giving legal advice, or it could involve doing brief services on a more extended basis. Basically, it's the equivalent of taking a bar exam every morning. So you start feeling out what areas of law you start retaining, and you probably are retaining them because they're of more interest to you. And so from like what area of law do I find an interest in, that really helped me develop my interests in housing and then in family law. I think volunteer opportunities offer that same opportunity to really feel out what areas of law. And if you're looking for volunteer attorney opportunities, I mean, I can only speak from a Washington perspective, but each county has a local bar association usually. And if you're in the major metropolitan areas like Tacoma or Seattle, they're going to have more clinic opportunities, or the State Bar Association will put on continuing legal education programs that say, come to this, volunteer for this clinic, and the CLE is free, and you get to do good work, and it gives you some exposure to some clients. It helps you feel out whether you like doing client interaction work. Some of those, there are other volunteer opportunities where you can say, I want to do policy work. And I know that plenty of the organizations that I work with, my organization is pretty client one-on-one interaction based, but my sister organizations do a lot more policy work than we do, and a lot of what we call impact litigation. And so working with one of those organizations, if you can come up with an innovative idea, or you can approach them, and usually as Dan was saying about, the mentor is going to be good at directing you. But if you can come up with an idea and be directed on who to approach on that can take off and help you explore policy work. For example, I have a lot of my colleagues that ended up in my organization. They started off developing projects through this organization that used to be known as Northwest Women's Law Center. It's now called Legal Voice, but they do both legislative work and trying to drive policies through that arena, but also they latch on to impact litigation. Is basically a case that's going to have a broad impact on a population, and they usually take those at appeal level, and that gives you another experience too, to try to explore whether your policy, geared more towards policy or more towards individual basis.
I think you need to be proactive in school, because this is the opportunity where there's so many different types of internships, externships, clerking. I did 4. I worked in the prosecution clinic, I worked in the DV clinic, I worked in the small business clinic, I externed for a judge. And so that meant I saw a whole lot of different things that had a direct impact on what I did after law school. And you have to be courageous to take that first step. If you're not sure, just take that first step, because if you don't like what you ended up in that first opportunity, you can always change it. Most lawyers go from one practice to another, so there's no shame in changing your practice area. One of my classmates has already been in 3 or 4 different practice areas, and every time she takes on a new practice area, she seems to increase her wage. So she's been in policy work, and she's been in policy work, and she's been in a nonprofit legal aid work, and now she's working for the federal government. And we've only been out of school for 2 years. So don't fear trying something just because you're not sure what you want to do.
I think also,
Sorry.
I was going to say, just to Dan's point about taking advantage of mentoring opportunities and talking to as many people as you can, and people who are in different areas that you're interested in. As you can see here, there's a diversity of positions and opportunities available to do different types of public interest work, and just, get different people's feedback on how they like their jobs and what kind of work they do specifically and what skill sets they use, to see how that matches up with the things that you're interested in. Another point that I want to make as the most junior attorney on the panel is that sometimes in your first year in practice, you're going to feel like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? How did I end up here? How do these people think that I'm competent enough to do what I'm doing? Maybe I'm not taking advantage of my skill set. And some of it is just really a confidence issue that's going to come up as you're starting to practice, and you just need to know that you've gotten this far already to be in law school. You've obviously worked really hard, and you're intelligent, and you have a lot to offer. So don't undercut your own abilities, and just know that some of it is just natural when you're starting to practice. It takes a while to build up your own confidence. It's not that you're in the wrong place. It's just that it takes time, and you're going to face some bumps in the road, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn from them, and it'll get better.
And the thing I would add to that too is I just had sort of a gut reaction to this question. The idea of individual work on behalf of individuals versus what you refer to as policy work or whatever, and what Chris is referring to as impact litigation. We have some of that too. I've been involved in some of it. But as far as the individual stuff, one thing to really think about, because I think you can check this out while you're in law school, you can use all the opportunities to try and figure it out. I highly recommend clinics, by the way, for that, and also, and for that matter, for job preparation, because let me tell you, you do not, I'm very glad that I did not graduate law school not knowing how to get an exhibit into evidence. But what I would say is that the gut reaction that you have to it that you don't see coming, because what law school kind of teaches you to do, I think if you just went through it doing the standard classes, you'd probably be pretty well prepared to make an appellate oral argument and about nothing else. So the thing I didn't expect to see, the thing that you really know, the thing that you feel, the reason I believe in individual work, when you think about these policy cases, you might make a small difference in a large number of lives. Or you, in some cases, maybe even a big difference in a large number, but there's one central difference. When you win, does your client cry? Does your client give you a hug? Does it make that big of a difference? The families that have kept their housing because of me, or their public benefits, their Social Security, their Section 8 vouchers, their public housing, the people that aren't being driven into bankruptcy because some firm that buys debts for 2 cents on the dollar is suing them with the anticipation of getting a default judgment and is very shocked to receive a notice of appearance instead. The reaction that you get from people when you can do something like that for them, and it can be just as bad because, you know, sometimes you lose and that causes devastating consequences. The problems are mischaracterized, I think, by the nature of the profession, by the nature of the system, as being less important. We put a dispute that's less than 10 grand in Arizona into something called justice court, where the judge is often not law trained. This was a shock to me when I first started. You could have a judge who did not go to law school. In fact, even the worst situation, especially bad for the landlord-tenant problems, is always, you know, most of them are retired cops. Guess who they're going to believe? Well, so there can be devastating consequences to this, but the point is, a problem that the system has classified as small, a small claim or a justice court claim. When I saw this, I said, okay, we've got these non-law trained judges. What authority do they have? The authority they have is to enter judgment against somebody for up to $10,000 or send them to jail for up to 2 years. That is a substantial consequence to an individual. And to label it as small or insignificant or unimportant isn't right. And that's how I found that to be the position. That's why I believe in representing individuals and in individual cases. Because on the whole, in the scheme of things, are you going to make headlines? No. Is the problem important by the conventional definition of that word? Perhaps not. But what it means to those individual lives, the difference that I know on an ongoing basis, the fact that this 5-person family is not homeless because I was able to step in, that sort of thing is how I found that niche, and that's why I personally felt individual over policy. So I'm not really giving you an answer as to how to find it or how to figure out what you want to be in, but I'm giving you an example of how I, in my case, decided.
You know, on the question of fit, I would urge all of you and you to be patient, to not make too quick a judgment. When I went into private practice, it really was against a lot of my core values at the time, but I wanted to try it. I wanted to prove to myself whether or not I could do it. But I didn't understand what I was getting into, and I didn't really figure it out for at least a couple of years. In retrospect, it was really valuable, even for what I'm doing right now. And so, especially when you're starting out in your career, I would encourage you, it's already been expressed here, but to try different things and to withhold judgment on whether or not it's a fit. Because it's a two-way street. You know, you can get a lot if you don't have that filter of your judgment, and just take it in and then reflect on it later and figure out whether you like it or not.
Well, every nonprofit organization has a board of directors, which is one way to get involved. You know, often nonprofits are looking for new board members, interested board members, and it's a commitment, and it's usually a multi-year commitment, but it's a great way to participate in an organization and see what they do and whether it fits for you. I would definitely recommend getting involved with a number of different things just to kind of get experience. I mean, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I still tried other things, and that really solidified for me that that's what I wanted to do, and it worked. I mean, so even if you go off and do other things and it's not ultimately what you decide to do, I think you still benefit from that tangent or just from that other experience. It's hard. It's you know, I feel pretty fortunate to have found it, and I wouldn't mislead anybody to believe that you can just go out and do it in a year and just find it and be happy. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it doesn't. But I think in the realm of public interest, if what's driving you is your passion for the work, then you really have, I mean, you have to find something that you're passionate about. You know, I mean, you have to find what really works for you, what you want to do, because you don't have the huge paycheck at the end of the week to compensate for a lack of passion, that sort of thing.
So I want to thank you for the questions. We are lucky in that now we have an opportunity to hopefully meet with all the panelists who are able to stay out in the Commons. I want to please join me in thanking all the panelists in this. Just really quickly, this is the third public interest symposium I've been involved in, and I just want to, on behalf of the public service of the PIPS board, I want to thank Professor Tom Leininger for helping to lead us in
I want to make a quick announcement. It is amazing what sacrifice our panelists have made. As you consider how far they've come and what they've shared with us, just think, I know Chris drove 5 hours this morning. He's going to drive 5 hours back tonight. Jamila drove yesterday 5 hours from Seattle, 5 hours back tonight. Tom Matsuda from Portland. Dina, we got a guy from Arizona.
My office is on 13th Street. Yeah.
But I just, you know, the passion these people have is evident in the fact that they went to such great difficulty to share their passion with us. And this is the beginning of a longer conversation, I'm sure. I mean, you probably will make contacts today among yourselves and with some of the panelists that will continue as your career matures. And I just think it's the great beginning of a